Don't miss this opportunity. It's the greatest opportunity. It's once in a species lifetime opportunity. I was able to go ahead and dislodge myself from my previous employer and retired. It doesn't stop. From here on out, it will be with me for the rest of my life. Bitcoin as a means of trying to preserve their wealth or create their wealth, because their country's currency is nothing. It's just paper. Without risk, there is no reward. You're born, you live, and you die. You decay. But does the protocol decay? Information never really decays, and I do everything I can to educate others close to me about Bitcoin. We can just print money out of thin air. How is that in any way, shape, or form any good for anyone? Be the voice of Bitcoin. Have you bought your Bitcoin today?
You told me that you were early retired because you were able to save and invest and do all that stuff, and you're now doing voiceovers. It's kind of obvious with your voice. I think it's a very logical and good decision. But before we get into this Bitcoin stuff, and I think saving for early retirement is something very Bitcoin-like. But let's get into it. How did you save? Did you have a savings rate? Did you have methods to do it? Did you had always this plan to retire early and I have this age and I want to retire, I have to save this much? How did you go ahead and do that?
Well, I've been an employee of the government, the local government, for most of my adult life. And if you're working for a government entity, particularly a county or a city or even the federal government, you do receive a pension after all of those years. And you have an opportunity as well to invest in 401ks and 457s with your company. And that's essentially what I did. And a little bit later on, several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, my wife and I, we bought a property, and we were able to capitalize on the equity inside of that property during COVID. And we sold our property for a considerable amount of money. And we were able to take some of that money and reinvest it into Bitcoin. And, Bitcoin is the best performing asset I've ever owned, aside from real estate. So up until that time, it was planning for the retirement, paying into the pension, saving in the 401k and 457, and doing that. And we're both, quote unquote, servants of the public, government employees, and my wife has pensions coming in and I do as well. And so we were able to retire early, because if you spend 30 years in a city, you're going to be able to retire with a sizable pension, and that's kind of how it just works. And so turned 55, retired, we moved, sold our home, bought another home, and invested the rest of it into Bitcoin. And it's just simply been the best performing asset that we have. And aside from that, when I was able to go ahead and dislodge myself from my previous employer and retired, I was able to take over those funds in my 457, and I in turn bought iBit on the day of launch. That's done very well as well. So any way I can capture Bitcoin, I will capture Bitcoin. So I wasn't able to exit those funds without paying tax consequences on them. So those will just continue to grow inside of that 457 till now, until I decide to settle on that iBit.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think also pension funds, it will there are so many effects to it, the pension funds and the IBIT and the ETFs on Bitcoin side. First of all, will have a massive inflow to Bitcoin, but also enables people without getting the penalties to get exposure to Bitcoin. This is something really, really great. And for people now that are listening, they are maybe early in the game and they are wondering and I think a lot of people still see Bitcoin as this risky thing. And I think actually it would be the best thing to have as seen as your pension, as your savings technology.
Absolutely.
Why do you see that as someone that retired actually early and are already in this stage where a lot of people want to go? Therefore, everybody that is now under 50, under 40, and say, I want to retire early. Why is Bitcoin the number one choice?
Well, I think it goes without saying that it still is the best performing asset, really of all time. And without risk, there is no reward. So the volatility is just natural for, in my opinion, a nascent technology, a nascent asset. And I'm sure that over time the volatility will likely begin to decrease. And I think that's just the natural part of an asset establishing itself in the market. Again, I'm no technical expert, but just from being able to witness different kinds of investment funds and different kind of asset categories throughout my adult life and those investment opportunities with my employer, there just simply hasn't been anything. There hasn't been a company. There hasn't been anything that's been able to produce the kind of return that Bitcoin has. So that in itself warrants and merits everyone's attention to taking a look at that asset and determining if that fits, their investment comfort level. And I just don't think that we're going, and there's no financial advice in this conversation with you. It's all a personal choice, but I can't imagine what else would come along and replace the perfect money, the perfect asset, the perfect return on investment that you're ever going to be able to get. I think as Myers puts it, it's a once in a species opportunity to grow your generational wealth. Once in a species opportunity. In my opinion, he's absolutely correct. We're never going to get this kind of opportunity again to own, to hold, to have the world's greatest monetary creation or discovery.
Yeah, I'm fighting with a ladybug here. So sorry. It was on my
Don't let her
hand and I
win.
was shaking it off, and now it's coming to my head.
She's coming for your Bitcoin.
It's coming from my Bitcoin, yeah. And it's totally
um,
true what you're saying, and it's something beautiful. And I saw it also, I think, on your timeline on Twitter. And this is something a lot of Bitcoiners that are longer in the game are saying, that Bitcoin is actually not a blockchain, but a time chain.
correct.
And when we are going down this rabbit hole, that is, Bitcoin is so much more than just money, and it's some like this once in a species opportunity. What
Yes.
does it mean for Bitcoin to be a time chain?
I really needed to understand Bitcoin more. Obviously, I think we all do, than rather just holding the asset. And I began to listen to the likes of Gigi, Gigi, and because I just think he's one of the greatest Bitcoin minds, aside from obviously Seyr and others. But I think he takes Bitcoin and he breaks it down into some fundamentals because I believe he's a software engineer, a coder. And so I've learned a lot from him, and I can kind of go into basically how I idealize or understand Bitcoin. And it may just be a regurgitation of the things that he said, but it makes sense to me. And it's why I decided to devote most of my time and, quite frankly, my capital, to Bitcoin. Because at its core, and I think people should understand what money is. I think it's a fundamental part of learning Bitcoin and just having a financial literacy, is that money is nothing but information. And it is information about who owes what to whom. And it's on a ledger, or it's on a list, or could even be a physical item that individuals traded way back when. Maybe it was shiny rocks, it was stones, it was beads, it was whatever it was, salt. And that was a medium of exchange. And I think that Satoshi actually has created the purest form of money because, again, money is information. And what I mean by that is that the internet, or our lines of communication channels, we send information. That's what we do. Information is, the internet is, the internet is information. And Satoshi created information in its purest form and then gave it all the necessary qualities to be the hardest form of money.
Yeah, it's also fascinating because for the first time ever, we have a pure form of an asset, of a blockchain, of a time chain, whatever you want to call it, that is not manipulated in the past. And yeah, I
Correct.
think I even read like, usually when I research about a guest, I scroll a little bit through the Twitter, and I saw something with like, took chaotic energy, put it in blocks, and
Mm-hmm.
ordered it in non-forgeable style. Like you cannot go back and manipulate something, and
Right.
which brings back accountability, taking responsibility of your own Bitcoin, which is something truly amazing in my opinion.
Yeah, as because energy is the currency of the universe, and we all have access to that energy. And by existing, we are energy, and energy is what connects Bitcoin to the digital world, and then the digital world to the real world. And that's my opinion on that. As far as energy is concerned, it connects everything, and we use proof of work as an energy source, right? If So, in my opinion, and probably many others, and Durgigi and such, is that Satoshi created a trustless digital decentralized currency. And in order to do that, he had to solve, or she, we assume he's a he, had to solve for the double spend problem, right? So, Robin, I can't send you a Bitcoin and then within moments later send it to someone else, right?
Mm.
And so, in order for that double spend problem to finally be understood, the challenge was to solve for it. And essentially, double spend is nothing more than time. So, listening to Gigi and Mahlers and such, and Mahlers did a great keynote presentation at Atlantis, and he talked about the physical arrow of time, right? And the arrow of time within Bitcoin. So, proof of work obviously is what our computers do. They harness physical energy power and they perform complex computations. And through proof of work, Satoshi linked the physical world to the digital world and then gave us the inception of the purest form of money, which again is information. And essentially, Bitcoin is a timestamp server, just like you mentioned, right? And it etches information, history of events in time into blocks. And those blocks are like clocks. So every block is like the tick of a clock. And each block contains information about an event that occurred. And the computations that are solved for are random and complex. And the randomness of that computation provides for the immutability of the blockchain. Randomness conceptually happens naturally in nature. The arrow of time is nothing more than we know what the past is and we do not know what the future. It is uncertain, it is unique, and it is random, right?
Is
So
that
in solving, go ahead.
is when you talk about Bitcoin being a timestamp server, being a time chain, do you also believe that at some point Bitcoin could actually be a measurement of time as we now use our usual calendar and time things with like 2 p.m. and stuff
It's
like that?
possible, considering that I consider it, and many others consider it, to be time on the internet, the source of time. It is the time chain of Bitcoin, and therefore it is time on the internet. Since the internet doesn't understand time, Satoshi gave it time. He created time. And then essentially, he had to slow the time down in order to make it a decentralized consensus protocol. Slowing the time down gave us all an opportunity to come to consensus and validate those transactions. So it's kind of like the creation of time and slowing the time down. And that's what Mahler's tried to describe. And it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it, but it does make sense when you think of the arrow of time physically. One of the things that is interesting to me about the physical form of the arrow of time that I don't think that we fully understand in Bitcoin yet, and that is through the arrow of time, things decay. You're born, you live, and you die. You decay. We build structures. There are mountains. They erode. The blocks and the stones that we build the structures out of over time decay. But does Bitcoin, does the protocol decay? Information never really decays, right? So I think that it could be an antithesis to the arrow of time, the physical understanding of the arrow of time as we venture into the digital arrow of time. Maybe there is no decay. I don't think we figured that out yet. I know I haven't. I'm not that smart. So,
And then there is also like so many, like for me, it's totally clear that Bitcoin will be the main asset for the Earth. And there's a
yeah,
lot of discussion also, like, can it be on other planets too? What is the synchronization going through? And as you said, I'm not an expert enough and I'm not well educated to make those judgments. I think it could be possible. I think there are really smart people that can find solutions also for that.
right.
But if we,
Scientist, which I am not. So, I kind of hypothesize in my layman's mind and kind of postulate on some of those things in the future. I know I won't be here to see them through, but because the proof of work is used in the process and on the protocol, that is what differentiates it from any of the other of crypto that exists out there. Because the proof of work is what actually the energy used to do the computations, the energy used in the proof of work actually protects the protocol. It protects the information. It becomes embedded inside of the block, and it becomes part of that block and becomes part of the block, the time chain. Got to get used to not saying the blockchain, but becomes part of the time chain, which then protects that information, the history of events, and therefore becomes immutable. Cannot
and
be rewritten.
for me, it's always interesting because different people hold Bitcoin for different reasons, and especially people get in for different reasons. There are people that
Right.
just go in because, oh, the number go up technology. I think those are the most people get in because of that or are getting interested in that. There are also people that got in actually because of the technology, like because they are nerds and they're like, oh, let's play around with Bitcoin, let's play around with blockchain. Those are less people. What was the reason for you? Like, why did you get into Bitcoin in the first place? And you
Yeah,
also shared with me beforehand that you had two brain surgeries, that you
that's
have like
correct.
serious
Right.
health issues. How did this all like? This was probably before you discovered Bitcoin. So let's go before that. Like, how did maybe this brain surgeries, and I think people that have something serious with health usually have a way healthier way to think about life.
Right. That's absolutely correct. You're forced to appreciate and be humbled by your existence and the things and the people you love around you. So yeah, it wasn't very long ago actually that I ended up having to have two brain surgeries, and there was reasons behind that, but the health reasons behind that is that my balance and hearing were completely just almost destroyed. And the brain surgeries, I had to actually fly out to a brain lab in California to have it done, some specialists, and it was on each side of my brain. Since then, the reasons I went in for have become completely corrected. However, I do have some balance issues, and I'm left with a small amount of brain damage as a result of that. So that journey actually sent me down, the blockchain path. I was scared, and to this day, I'm still frightened of losing some memory, of losing the ability to function cognitively. I do see some declines in me as a result, but I still think that my muscle memory is intact for the most part. And like I said, that led me down the avenue of how do I keep my brain active and alive and interested in stuff, because it was the only thing that interested me, to go down this rabbit hole. Now, I started out in crypto, just mostly like other Bitcoiners. I got wrecked. I learned, and I'll never do that again. Bitcoin essentially saved me from that. And I did everything I needed to learn and understand the scope of Bitcoin the best that I could. and it gave me the the wherewithal to get through some of the things that I needed to get through personally. It gave me something to look forward to, research, study, the things that have always interested me, or all kinds of things technical. I've done a little programming in my time, but I'm certainly no programmer. But it kept my mental memory, and it kept me cognitively astute. I do have some difficulty talking sometimes, but that's just a part of being what it is. And I don't know that I mentioned that it also gave me seizures and epilepsy as well. So there are some things that I just struggle with, and Bitcoin's my outlet. And it's certainly, the greatest thing ever invented. So why not why not enjoy research and study in the greatest thing ever invented for mankind, and discovered. So
And I think it's it's still amazing what we have as a pleasure to have. Like we have the pleasure being alive in this time when money is being revolutionized
absolutely.
completely. And it's like the internet itself is great. And then on top of that, there's Bitcoin that revolutions the whole money thing. And I think 2 or 3 guests ago, I had guys Swan on, and we actually talked about which revolution is bigger, the internet itself or Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin built on top of the internet, or is it like separate stuff? And we kind of landed on that Bitcoin is the bigger one.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin also does not need the internet, actually,
No.
because you could actually, like, it's not feasible, but you could actually just write it down on a piece of paper and do the whole thing,
Yeah,
because it's a protocol.
absolutely.
It's just an idea. So that's amazing. And what I'm now questioning, did all the things that happened in your life with brain surgeries and stuff like that influence how you then discovered Bitcoin and the way you think of Bitcoin? Obviously, you need a Bitcoin to like get your brain going, and it's something that interested you. But how did it like maybe change your view on Bitcoin that might be different to somebody else?
Well, it just flipped the switch, right? It made me take a deep dive into financial literacy and economics. What I thought I knew, I really didn't know. And I think a lot of people will express that. What we thought we knew about the existing system, or what we were programmed to know. Bitcoin helped us understand what it can be and should be. And so the journey still continues to the day. I don't stop. It's every single day. It's Bitcoin. Hold on. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So every single day, I want to know and learn more about Bitcoin. That doesn't change. And I don't see that changing. It's not as if the protocol itself is evolving. It's I am evolving in understanding Bitcoin and how I can use it and how it relates to my life and what I will be doing it and how I will be sharing it with my family for years to come. So I think everybody finds their own journey and their own reason. And that just happened to be mine. It was my step into the door, the Bitcoin door. It became the reason why I wanted to learn more. Is that some things happened in my life, and I think that could be the case for others. Something prompts them, right? Something in their life prompts them to go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, or at least begin to understand time chains and blockchains and everything involved in that. That was mine. It doesn't stop. From here on out, it will be with me for the rest of my life. And I do everything I can to educate others close to me about Bitcoin. I'm not giving them financial advice, but I just encourage them. Take time to study it, because when you do, you're going to understand what money is. And you're going to begin to understand that what you have learned all these years, you will have to unlearn. Bitcoin forces you to do that.
How successful are you with educating others? Because I saw that it's actually not easy. Like it's easy to get people to like buy some Bitcoin, like to convince them that it's a clever strategy to have some exposure to Bitcoin. I think this
Right.
is getting an easier and easier sell. But from having a little bit of Bitcoin, it's a far way to being a Bitcoiner.
Right.
Adopting that mindset, to adopting like the whole revolution. Like the one thing is Nambuck up technology, but there are 20 more perspectives that you that needs to take to like Bitcoin. Do you have like orange pilling stories or things that
Well,
are
I think it depends on the person that you're talking to and the amount of money they're interested to invest in, if any at all. And then it also depends on, I think, where Bitcoin is in the market, right? Are we in a bear market? Are we in a bull market? What cycle of the market are we in? Because at the end of the day, for the most of everyone else around the planet, everything is driven by the amount of money they either can spend or the amount of money they think they're going to get a return on their investment, right? And so oftentimes in my experience, it really begins with trying to educate that person about money, about finance, about the debasement of the currencies, about fiat, about Federal Reserve, just because, as you probably know, more people than not, more people do not know as much about finance as they think they do. I know I didn't. Perhaps you did. So it depends on the individual. Um, if Bitcoin is trading at $15,000, it's hard to try to convince someone that Bitcoin will likely be $100,000 one day. It's almost impossible and impractical to try to do that. So you have to kind of give them the basis for making that decision on the foundation and understanding of fiat, what it means, what it doesn't mean, the devaluation, the debasement, why you're putting your money into this asset, why it is the hardest asset known to man. It's a lot to go into, and sometimes I just don't have the patience for it. It just depends on the person. If it's a family member that I know that could really benefit from something like this, I just want them to understand and educate themselves and learn. So I give them the material to read, or I show them the things they need to read. And if they have an interest, then that's my door in. If they don't, I'll walk away.
And I have one amazing thing. I don't know if I ever shared it on the podcast, but I think the best way to orange pill someone is to have an amazing life yourself. If
Yeah,
people know that you are a Bitcoiner, like you have 100% being on a Bitcoin standard, and they at the same time see, oh shit, he has a happy family, he does well in the career, he does good financially, and he's just overall a nice, kind human being that gives back to the society, contributes something, like is happy, like all this good stuff. If you if people see that, they are listening to you. They are
that's a
taking you
great
as a,
point.
and and
That's a
uh,
great point.
and I
I
always
remember one person, I basically had to show them, here's my return on investment. I don't know where else you're going to find a better asset to put your money into. It's not going to be Apple. It's not going to be Google. I was here in the beginning of the internet. I know I missed opportunities then. Bitcoin wasn't around, but I missed opportunities to invest in those burgeoning nascent companies, those technology companies. Missed that opportunity. It is what it is. Trying to explain that to a younger person, hey, I missed this opportunity. You might want to make sure you don't miss this one, right? And yes, I may have been successful. I may have retired early, but I didn't do that on Bitcoin per se. I did that with other investments during those times that those assets did well. So now is the time for you to consider the opportunities that are before you that I once had that I didn't have then when it came to Bitcoin, but you have an opportunity now. You're absolutely correct. Success can be a good thing, and then it can kind of be detrimental when you go on X and you see these individuals who do make a lot of money. They have a lot of Bitcoin, and sometimes I don't think they have the best interest of the community with some of the things that they recommend or say. And that can be detrimental to someone who only can afford, you know, zero point zero 0.01 Bitcoin. That is their life savings going into that. This is a global currency. So obviously there are people out there that have less than we do and more than we do. So we need to be careful, in my opinion, and we need to be cautious about how we approach people because they may not have the kind of quote unquote wealth that we do or live the lifestyle we do.
Do you speak of a specific example on the internet, or is it like just general?
I mean, I think there's plenty. I don't want to call anyone out. I think there's plenty of examples, but I think crypto is just the worst place where people are just scamming and rugging people relentlessly. And I don't see that as much in Bitcoin because the community calls that person out and they'll do it in a heartbeat. You know, our maxis or the hornets will get out there and take control like they should in those cases. But it's just terrible. And to your point, crypto is to many people an easier in because it costs less to participate in those currencies or coins. Let's just call them tokens. They're not really currencies. And people think, well, I can drop $1,000 and get 1,000,000,000 coins and it'll go to the moon. Well, obviously, we all know through time and experience that's not the case. It's typically the easier way in. It drug me in the beginning, and I had to fight my way out of it. Got wrecked along the way, and learned my lesson. And I'm happy to have learned that lesson. It taught me well. But I wish I had just gone into Bitcoin first.
21 Bitcoin is Bitcoin only from day one, and they teach and preach self-custody. This is my go-to exchange when someone asks me, oh, where can I buy my Bitcoin from? This is the easiest entry for Bitcoiners. And if you want lower fees, plus at the same time support this podcast, use code Robin and click the link in the description. Yeah, and I think this is something I hope at some point we get through this thing that not every Bitcoiner has to go through a shitcoin phase and get wrecked.
Right. Right. It would be wonderful if we could just get rid of shitcoins. The world would be a better place.
I mean, for me personally, I never had a really shitcoin phase. I lost a lot of Bitcoin along the way. I lost Bitcoin with Celsius. I lost Bitcoin with other stuff. I lost Bitcoin with so many weird stuffs. And I could probably have like 3 times the amount that I have now. But I'm still super grateful that I just got Bitcoin right now. Even like if I just started accumulating Bitcoin even yesterday, I would be super happy.
Right.
It's a super early place to be in. And the thing I wanted to point out earlier also was when you said you missed out on the opportunity to invest in the internet. That's basically all built on the TCP/IP protocol.
Right.
And the thing that I try to get people to know is when imagine all the value of Facebook, Apple, Google, and co. are all going back to the main layer, the TCP/IP protocol. And then imagine you're being in 1995 and you could imagine, and you can invest in this TCP/IP protocol token and you profit and you basically get all the financial energy gain from Facebook, from Google, from Apple, from Amazon, everything. That's Bitcoin.
Correct. Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. You know, I was younger when the internet came about, and I used it to the fullest extent that I could, not really understanding its value, right? And I see that in perhaps younger people, they fully don't understand the value of Bitcoin yet. Maybe it is a level of maturity. Who knows? I think that as we age, I hope we become more mature, you know, as we age. But some of younger people are far more advanced in maturity than many others, and particularly me, and you know, in many cases, and are already into Bitcoin. It just wasn't something that I understood at a younger age. So, you know, missing it is missing the opportunity to make money. That's what that meant at the time, because it certainly is not the protocol, and it is not the money that Bitcoin is today. It didn't have those qualities and never will have those qualities, never did and or won't. So I didn't miss anything except an opportunity to make money, to take my capital, not capital that I had at work and that they were investing for me, but able to put my money into that. I used it to the fullest extent, and I even, created web pages back in the day on HTML, and I got in the chat rooms and did all that when then I had the dial up 56 kbps. And if somebody called on the phone, you got disconnected. It was way back, so and then there was a time where there wasn't the internet. So, again, kind of like you talking about, orange pilling the average person. It is about the successes you've made along the way, but it's also about the mistakes that you've made along the way, and being able to convey that to someone, I think is paramount in getting them to understand, just don't miss this opportunity. It's the greatest opportunity. It's once in a species lifetime opportunity, generational wealth.
And for people to understand what opportunity it is, we also have to explain them why is it a revolution in the first place. Like a lot of people still think, oh, it's fine, the fiat system. Yes, we have inflation, but it's okay. I get also a bigger salary. I don't know how it's in your place, but in Austria, there's like something as called as an inflation balance. We have a really strong union, so they are discussing with the work. The union is discussing with the companies and pay upgrade for everyone, basically, and everyone that is on the lower limit of pay gets then 10% more, which just drives inflation even more. But that's another topic.
Right.
And they're like, oh yes, inflation is like 8%. I got a 10% raise this year. It's fine. What they don't realize, real inflation is way higher than that 8%, whatever
Correct.
they are given. And what they're also not understanding is like stealing is not good. Like they are stealing.
Inflation is theft, as Jeff Booth says, and he's absolutely correct.
100%. What do you think is about the current financial system? Like, what's like your overall take? What's wrong with it, and why Bitcoin is actually the whole fix for that?
Well, the current fiat system is a Ponzi scheme. Everyone likes to call Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme, but it's fundamentally just exactly what that is. It's a Ponzi scheme. We can just print money out of thin air. I mean, how is that in any way, shape, or form ever good for any good for anyone? It's complete and total debasement of a fiat currency. It doesn't matter what nation you're in, and eventually it'll reach hyperinflation status, right? I mean, at some point you just can't print any more money. I live in the U.S. We're $33 trillion in debt. We can't pay the bills, but we keep raising our credit limit and we keep printing money. COVID propelled us into that $30 trillion category. In fact, the great financial crisis started it all, where we injected money into companies that were and banks that were just too big to fail. Well, some things need to fail. By way of the arrow of time and decay, you have got to fail. Some things have got to fail. And Satoshi, I mean, he literally created the purest form of money, right? And then he laid a currency, or a purest form of protocol, if you will, of order of transactions and events, and created time on the internet, slowed that time down so we could come to consensus about those transactions and that history recreated as a global economy. And he laid the most scarcest, hardest, finite currency ever on top of it. And because of this, that information is now money. And I think it's Gigi that says that Bitcoin's bearer instrument is information. So the physicality of that is the data and the information itself inside of the block. It goes back to the list is the ledger, and the money is the list, and the list is the money. And so if we need to create the most sound, stable monetary policy that mankind has ever known, then the existing systems are not that. Bitcoin is. They never will be that because they are man-made created. And what I mean by that is that there is government, there is regulation, there is something behind that money that makes it valuable to them so that the people of those nation states can use what they created for them, where Bitcoin is what we created for ourselves. And therefore, it has more meaning and more value. From a philosophical standpoint, that's how I see Bitcoin. It has the value because we attributed the value and no one controls the value. Therefore, it cannot be a Ponzi scheme, right? Because money is information. We have information that we carry out throughout everyday life. We use a communication channel. We share information with each other. And so if that's what it's meant by design, that's exactly what it is. So there isn't a government out there that will ever create, by design, governments can't create the most ideal money because it's a third party. It's an intermediary. Someone controls the keys and the coins. And obviously, if you have humans involved in money, well, guess what's going to happen? We know what's going to happen throughout time. It's a complete and utter disaster. Nothing works. It will always be corrupted. It will always fail. It's just going to happen that way with a protocol that is something that is done via consensus, via validation, without an intermediary, a controlling organism. Then that is the hardest, finite, scarcest form of money, again, ever known to man. I challenge anyone to find something better. I mean, you bring it to me. Show me what's better. If you can't, then, the conversation is over. If you can't like Satoshi says, I don't have time to explain it to you. If you don't take the time to understand it yourself and the value that it brings to humanity and the globe, I'm not sure that we can continue the conversation because, again, you're missing out on the most important thing that's ever been created. Satoshi I can't even imagine the level of intellect that individual had. I mean, we were graced with that kind of intellect that gave us the purest form of money. And I'm getting philosophical, but it is actually just that. We were given an opportunity, right? And for those of us that are taking that opportunity, we are probably a few million out there that understands the necessity of this kind of currency and this monetary value and policy. And unfortunately, not everybody is there. And every time we turn around, there's a government that's trying to control it for us, right? I think the EU, you can probably give me some background on this, but I was reading about this the other day, how they're using their anti-money laundering laws that they're passing, making, I guess, wallets in some cases illegal. Well, that just tells you that Bitcoin is doing exactly what we want it to do. They're fighting us, right? They're fighting what is going to be the money of the universe eventually. AI will probably use it. We're not going to be around in 1,000 years when artificial intelligences are paying each other via Bitcoin because that's the base layer monetary system reserve currency of the universe. But it will be that way one day. So you're either here or you're not. And hopefully you are.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I think what the EU is doing is they're trying to control this thing that they cannot control, and they want to have influence and monitoring everything they can. So they are saying there is something like an unhosted wallet, just a fancy way of saying you have your own keys. And this is only acceptable for transactions up to 3,000 euros.
Wow.
I'm not an expert on this topic. I did not research deeply. When will this implemented? Is it already implemented? All this legal stuff, because I actually don't care. Like if the EU or Austria does something I don't agree with, and I'll probably hear it really really soon, because I'm really deep in the community. I am prepared to move tomorrow.
Right.
And the
I,
only thing countries and the EU and whatever is do when they are trying to ban or limit Bitcoin, the only thing they can do is just banning themselves from Bitcoin.
it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. It's the fear of Bitcoin, right? I mean, these individuals, I think, not all of them, but I'm sure there are plenty of people in the EU that understand what Bitcoin is capable of and what it is already doing. So they fear that adoption. They fear that their fiat currency will be worth nothing one day. And quite frankly, it is worth nothing. And yes, one day it will fail. And what is the stand in for that? Well, obviously Bitcoin. So I think it's, what did they say? First they laugh at you. I don't remember exactly the the cadence, but first they laugh at you, then X, and then they fight you. So I think we're at the fight you stage, right? And then they finally accept.
Yeah, I think it's like first they ignore you, then they laugh at you,
Yeah.
then they fight you, and then they join you.
Yep. That's it.
And we are weirdly in the fighting and joining stage. Like I feel like America is coming closer and closer to Bitcoin with the Bitcoin ETF. There are like president candidates that are talking positively about Bitcoin. But there are also the Elizabeth Warrens and the Jamie Dimons
Right.
of the world. But these are, I feel like they're getting really, really, not a lot of people in America talks really negative about it. And the positive voices, also the powerful positive voices, are getting more. Like just Larry Fink. It's massive to have him as someone saying, "Oh, it's digital gold." It's something like, I don't know if he actually gets it or some just read some scripts, but it actually does not matter, because it's just the fact that he speaks so much about Bitcoin is good for
Right.
Bitcoin. Even if he spoke bad about it, but the fact that he speaks good about it contributes even more. And yeah, it's like we are in this weird stage where it's still fighting. It's still like it's not totally legal everywhere. There's limitations to it, and there's taxes on it. There's so much stuff with Bitcoin that will not be there in like 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. I don't know the timeline. But this may be actually interesting. Do you have like a timeline in your head? Like, do you have like fiat currencies cannot survive longer than like X years?
I don't know, Robin. I really don't. I mean, I'm surprised they've lasted this long, and as evidenced by just the trillions of dollars that the U.S. government is printing. And I don't know anything about European government in the sense of like executive, judicial, legislative branches. But I feel I feel confident in our government's judicial system. If anything, our executive branches and our legislative branches fail us and try to pass laws that infringe upon our First Amendment rights, I do feel that our judicial system will work and quite frankly is working in the American people's favor. Because if anybody holds the Constitution to its word, the judicial system does, right? And so I don't know, I don't think that we'll ever run into a situation that the EU is currently having. But I know our judicial system will work, and it is working, because states are somewhat sovereign, right? We are the United States of America. So we're united. We have a federal government, obviously, and state governments. And there are many states right now, to include my own Texas, who are going, nope, no CBDCs are coming this way. We will mine Bitcoin. We will use our energy, our state's energy, and we will do these things, and you are not going to tread on us for that. And so again, I don't know very much about the EU, but if the president ever said, I'm going to ban all Bitcoin, well, that's not going to happen in the Americas. It's just simply not. Our
It,
legislative branch and our judicial branch will not let that happen. At least
it's
not while I'm alive.
it's in the EU. It's an interesting because the EU, it's they're trying to regulate a lot. The good thing is the states, the countries, they're even more independent. And okay, I'm not an expert actually, but from my feeling, they're even more independent because a lot of laws, with even the data laws, they were not like there's a lot going on in the EU, a lot
Right.
of regulations top down, and then countries decide on their own how to implement them, and they have to execute them also. And I see for good that it's all very slow, so that's the good thing. But unfortunately, they are really passionate about their digital euro, where I see in America, I'm really proud of the Americans, and there are so many great forces against the CBDCs and saying like this
Right.
will not come to us. Then we also have Canada, where they are saying they are already putting things into place where they are connecting bank accounts to the social credit system, which is wide, wide that
Yeah.
they are doing it. So it will be an interesting next few years. But in the end, Bitcoin does not care, and I'm prepared to move.
Yeah.
That's
No, I hear you. If I had to, I would move as well. Maybe South America, some countries that their government is less involved, probably because the government is not even, it's not adept. It's not even functioning. And those people are using, Bitcoin as a means of trying to preserve their wealth or create their wealth because their country's currency is nothing. It's just paper. And so I do have some faith in our country and the people of America and our country. But they're fighting us, Robin, because they know that you're right. They know what Bitcoin offers. They're afraid. They're afraid of it. It will eventually lead to their downfall. And it's as simple as that. And many do realize that, but I think I had told you that I tried to keep an arm's length with politics, with Bitcoin, because I do view Bitcoin as being amoral, like it or not, apolitical and agnostic. And I do feel that we need to grow our Bitcoin tent wider and not shrink it. We need to let anyone in, regardless of their social constructs, ideologies, religious beliefs, or anything related to how they may feel or perceive other things, because that's not what Bitcoin is. It is not for only a certain set of people. It's for everyone. It's a global currency, and I do kind of like to push back, especially those that espouse libertarian points of view that freedom for all. Well, that means freedom for everyone and how they feel and act and do, whether we agree or disagree, or whether we accept or we don't accept. Bitcoin's for everyone.
100%. And this is also something that I'm kind of sad, something about of the Bitcoin community that are like, oh, you're not a Bitcoiner, you're not this and this. I'm like, you don't have to be a Bitcoiner to have Bitcoin, and who's to say what a Bitcoiner is? Like,
Right. You're right. Yeah.
it's just in the end of the day, it's a tool. It's money. Like everybody can use it, and that's the great thing about, because bank accounts don't have this. Bank accounts actually are saying, no, you cannot open a bank account with you here because that and that reason.
Right.
And for Austrians, it's not hard. It's hard to imagine because we have a banking rate of like 99.999%. Almost everybody has a bank account. But there are other countries. I mean, India is a really big country. Only 20%, I think 20% are unbanked. When I recall it, or only 20% banked. I think 20% are unbanked, which is crazy. Then there are places on the earth that are just 50% banked,
Right.
and or like even less than that. There are places there's on the global scale. There are more people with an internet connection or smartphone than with a bank, which is an
You're correct. Yes.
crazy statistics. And when we now zoom out like the next 50 years, and we try to figure out, okay, what are we looking for? What's Bitcoin success look like? If you think like, oh, in 50 years, and we want to say Bitcoin was successful, how does this world look like in 50 years that we can confidently say in 50 years, oh, Bitcoin was actually successful? What has Bitcoin then done to the world?
And that's a profound question, right? To try to think into the future. What I think with a response to that is that as long as Bitcoin keeps doing what it does right now, it will be the same thing. It will be better for humans, for the human race 50 years from now, if it's just what it is today. I consider, I kind of view Bitcoin as a digital organism in a sense. Perhaps that's kind of unusual, but I kind of akin it to a mathematical cyberspace organism of code. And it uses humans to keep it alive, right? It pays us and rewards us to keep it alive, to keep it going. So it will always be here, whether we're here or not, because artificial intelligence will do the same thing. And it also, I mean, if you think about it, it stores the rest of itself. All of us want the rest of the Bitcoin, right? That's locked in time on the time chain. We'd like to have it right now, but we can't. So others will be able to have some too, right? I mean, it keeps itself alive by us continuing to interact with it and rewards us for doing so. And it uses the energy that we give it to protect itself. So as long as it's continuing to do what it does now, 50, 100, 1,000 years from now, then it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So I think of it from a philosophical standpoint because I cannot predict the future. Just like the arrow of time, there's uncertainness, there's uniqueness, there's randomness. And there's no way any of us can do that. We can speculate on prices. We can speculate on many things, but Bitcoin's arrow of time will be deterministic for itself for however long it is alive.
That's an amazing point to come to our end routine. Actually, I think this is such a beautiful statement in itself. And as you might know, we have an end routine where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without
Okay.
knowing who the next guest is. And the previous guest asks you because he might or she actually might look for the answer herself. If you had to start, and this is actually something, if you don't have it, you should definitely have it. And you still definitely started, Julian. If you had to start a Bitcoin podcast, how would you name it?
Let me think about that. I guess I would name it The Life and Times of Bitcoin.
Perfect. Then that's your start of your Bitcoin podcast, right?
Oh, there you go. Maybe one day I can have the greats of Robin Seyr on my The Life and Times of Bitcoin podcast.
I would love to be the first guest, actually.
Well, maybe we'll do that. Who knows?
I think you have the perfect voice to do anything with voice,
Thank
like
you. Thank you.
podcasting, as you do
Like I
for
said, maybe I
your
could be the voice of Bitcoin. Have you bought your Bitcoin today?
Julian, it was amazing to have you on. It was a great pleasure. This over 1 hour of what we are now recording is was flying by so quickly. I'm truly thinking of maybe doing more and extensively and longer podcasts even in the future, because 1 hour seems so short. Like it's like we just started, like we just getting warmed up now. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being on, and for everybody that is now curious about you and want to know, ask you questions. Where can they find you, or where can people, reach you?
Well, I'm mostly just on X at this point. So at Bitcoin Miser is my handle. So be kind and check it out, and maybe give me a follow. But I've really, really enjoyed my time with you, Robin. I think you're doing wonderful things for the community, and I just think it's amazing. I appreciate you having the time and considering me to be on your. I'm humbled, so thank you, and I hope we get to do this again.
Thank you. I will definitely do it. I think this is a question that came up with some previous guests, especially in the beginnings. Like, I will do a second round of my guests. It's just that there are so many great people in Bitcoin, and I
Yeah,
did not get to any of them. It feels like you're my 80th guest now, and I feel like I'm just barely scratching the surface of Bitcoiners. And this is like, I want to have the biggest variety of guests on my podcast, and I want to have 300 people just this year on my podcast. So I will definitely do a second round. I will definitely do a second round with you. I just don't know when the time will come.
yeah, no
Probably end of
worries.
the year, probably next year. Yeah. I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
that.
great. I mean, you have plenty of people out there to choose from, so I think 300 is a noble goal, and I bet you'll make it.
Perfect. Then thank you, Julian, and yeah,
Thank you.
see you soon.
Take care, Robin.